And now we're recording. Hey, Marty.
Hey, Phil.
Morning.
Good morning.
Is it Monday? It feels like Monday to me. So I hope you're
Monday morning,
doing
first
okay.
best time for an interview.
Yeah, I know. That's true. I do like to do these in the morning when we're optimistic and full of hope and not wait until the end of the day. Look, I've known you a long time, and this is really wonderful that you're coming along to the event and you'll be presenting a session. I first met you back in the probably my first week at Revit when you were
Yep.
the product manager there.
Yep.
And it's been heady days ever since. I really appreciate all that you've taught me. Yeah, give us, if you would, I would say you're a veteran of this AEC technology, software space. You've been doing this a long time. So give us an overview of who's Marty.
Sure. Right. But I came out of practice, like many people, right? And got into software, right? So
We did. We all came out. A lot of us came out of practice. There weren't that
I
many
think
that weren't.
a lot of the people I've run into, especially on the product side, if they weren't, code writers, they had a background in practice. And if you want to go way back, I actually started out as a carpenter on a framing crew.
Let's
But
go sideways just a little bit. How important is it, in your estimate, for the leadership in a technology company to come out of practice?
I don't think the leadership needs, the executive team needs to come out of practice, but I do think that the people that fall in love with solving the problem have to really understand the problem. And in this business, you really have to have practiced to actually have a nuanced understanding of the problem. So, even though I joke about being on a framing crew, most of my time was spent in architecture and engineering. So I practiced. I was at 4 different firms during my time in design. The last one, RMW in San Francisco, actually designed Autodesk offices, and that's one of the ways that I got to know Autodesk marketing, and that's one of the way I got headhunted into being a product manager for product before Revit. So yeah, I've been doing this since the mid '90s in software, and some good stories actually that I learned a lot of lessons in those architecture days that apply to software, and a lot of lessons from software that apply to architecture. So it's
Yeah.
interesting.
Well, I wouldn't know that leadership at Revit, senior leadership, had necessarily had AEC industry experience, but they certainly had industry experience and empathy for solving the problem. Yeah, that's
But
important.
yeah, pretty much everybody on my team had come out of practice, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of people on the customer success team had come out of practice too, right? So there were an awful lot of people. That team, that exec team, knew they needed to hire a lot of people that had deep backgrounds in order to really understand the problem in a nuanced way, which I think is super important.
All right, then. Your present role with Schema, you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So right now I'm the chief technology officer at a company called Skema, that is generative design software. It's 3D software. It's web-based software. You might call it one of the BIM 2.0 applications. A little different corner of the room than some of the other BIM 2.0 applications, but I think part of what we really do well is generating really good Revit models to try and save people weeks of time on a project. And so that's one of our main things is just the quality of the Revit models we generate, and the fact that you don't have to go fix them, which I think is that's a pretty high bar. And I think right now we're the only ones meeting that bar. So we continue to basically focus on never eroding that bar.
Yeah, I was immediately impressed. Again, well, maybe because I have empathy for what it's like to design files that are large with a multiple of repetitive relationships and how sticky that gets inside of Revit, and the ability to take that into an environment where it's lightweight, where it's
Mm-hmm.
flexible, where you can see the data and then flick a switch and see the geometry, because I think both are really, really important. And then push that back to Revit better than Revit does is just incredibly important. And I don't know anyone else that's close.
Well, thanks. When
Yeah.
forced to describe it in one sentence at Next Build, I basically said it's like a lighter way of working with Revit data in a browser.
That's it. We go between floors on an elevator, and you just told me what it does.
Right.
Yeah, I think if any company is out there doing large macro level projects where you have to maintain relationships understand it. It's lightweight, it's flexible, and then you say, okay, I'm ready to commit this design decision. It just seamlessly connects to Revit, and you're not going into groups and deleting shared walls, and things aren't sticky. That's just beautiful, Marty, and it's something that, I mean, we've needed this for a long time. So I'd encourage anyone that does large projects to reach out to you guys.
Now the other thing too is we talk about Revit a lot because we've got people from the original Revit team, but it runs in a web browser, but it also runs embedded in Revit or embedded in SketchUp or alongside Rhino. So it's not Revit exclusive, but one of the things is being able to produce very good Revit files out of it. So
yeah, good on you. Stay the course. Let's talk about your session that you have that's been proposed and accepted. I'm just going to refresh my memory here. The impact of AI in construction delivery and how it's going to impact the practice of architecture. So give us an overview of why this is important, and I'll probably have a couple of follow-up questions.
Yeah, it's when I first started Schema, Martin Day was asking why Schema would be important. And I had to give him this answer, which is a quote from Patrick Mays, that an architect is a special kind of lawyer. And the reason you can't just cut them out of the process is they have a very important legal role. But at the same time, the architect, right, is serving an owner, and that owner cares other than what the building looks like and what the design intent is. And so this builds on some work. So if I back up after leaving, I spent 10 years at Dassault Systems, largely looking at how construction might change based on moving from what are trades in the field to something more organized, some sort of prefab, whether that's panelized or modular, and what systems might support that. And Dassault, to their credit, pioneered all these systems in all of the manufacturing industries that are not construction, but there are fundamental differences between construction and manufacturing. So that proved and disproved some, what I would call first principles that people might think of in applying some of those technologies. At NextBuild a few months ago, I had a room full of people who were BIM experts in a session. Many of them were Revit experts. Some were Graphisoft experts. I even had a handful of IDEA experts. And the subject there was speculating if we were designing Revit today in the age of agentic AI, what first principles might change and what BIM designed for that might look like. Because BIM was never designed for agentic AI, right? It existed decades before agentic AI. This is sort of corollary to that. So I surveyed that audience, and I have some survey results, and we'll bring some of those up in the session just to set the tone, because there's some interesting, surprising insights from that session. And I thought about this as a corollary to that, because BIM changing might affect the practice of architecture, but owners demanding things out of the construction process is definitely going to change the process of architecture, because right now it's a very waterfall process, right? You iterate with the owner, but then you get to design intent, you get a permit, you have the permit set of record, and now anytime you're going to make changes to that, you got to issue revisions or addenda, and it's a very formalized process. And the last phase of it is always legal action in many commercial cases.
But you and I experienced that. You think it's done when you signed off and you got approval, and you get bids for construction, and then something has to change for good reason.
Yeah. And that good reason usually has nothing to do with design. It's the realities in the field, or the realities of not being able to get something from the supply chain, or the realities, that are imposed on the team that's trying to make the thing and deliver the actual built result. And so a lot of the learnings from Dassault around what might change as certain portions become more industrialized is something that was recently, McKinsey looked at that idea back in like 2015. So that's sort of old news. But McKinsey recently released a report saying how construction might be changed by agentic AI. And so we'll look at some of those insights in the session. And I think the changes to the BIM environment, combined with some of McKinsey's projections on what might change in construction delivery and what owners might be demanding, will make for a fascinating discussion in the room of especially people used to professional practice and talking to clients and sort of triangulating how these forces might shape what principals and senior leaders at architecture firms have to deal with.
I don't know how we can, well, maybe in our present state, it seems so unpredictable. And you've famously said, and originally I objected to it, and now I've come around a long time ago, but you said the purpose of Revit was to coordinate documentation.
Right.
And I thought, no, we're building models. It's going to be amazing. And in fact, I would almost abstract it to say we're turning electricity into drawings. We're not making buildings, we're making drawings, legal documents of records, instructions. And then the last firm I worked for, they were changes, client-led changes based on ongoing market research for a condominium project. Mm-hmm. And we would think it would be done. Right. And then on a Monday morning, find out that we need more of apartment B and less of apartment C. And it all has to fit inside the same footprint because that was what their data was saying people were moving into the region, or that was a more desirable unit type. And we could coordinate the drawings.
But you'd have to redesign it, and that would take you 4 or 6 weeks to rebuild all of it in Revit.
And we don't. And how do we understand the implications of that? Because, yeah, it's done. Well, we weren't using Revit, to be honest. At the time, we were using a product by another company, and it was actually so disruptive because, and it wasn't ADT, but we were having to modify the model, and then it was taking an entire day to extract the drawings. And so at some point we just stopped modifying the model and started tweaking the drawings. Yeah. And then later on, when there would be a really big change, we go, well, we should do this in the model. And then it would break all of the stuff that we've done in the drawings. And that was about the time I saw Revit. I thought, well, maybe this will solve that problem. But trying to...
That's a first principle, which is people will tend to do whatever's easiest.
Right? Yes.
If you don't want to update the model because it's easier to just mess with the drawings, and they'll mess.
I'll just move this door. I'll just move this window. I'll just move this water closet. Oh, that has to change. Let's change the model.
So what's fascinating about this is agentic AI really changes what's easy and what's hard. There are things that were impossible that are now like pretty straight.
Does it change what's predictable and not predictable?
I can't tell you about that. That's usually more in how you divide the problem and predictability. Is first off, if you're relying on skilled labor in the field, nothing's ever going to be predictable because it means Joe with the skill saw can make a change because he decides to do something easier, right? So, in a way, there are parts of the project that aren't going to get predictable anytime soon because of the way they're executed with field labor. The parts that you can organize ahead of time, and there's a lot of forces in the market, especially in the supply chain, that are causing that reorganization. And that, to me, agentic AI makes that reorganization faster because you can surface the things that are the underlying root causes that you're trying to affect.
You can't fix them, but you can identify.
You can identify them, but then you can come up with a process to design something that works better than that. And so there are actors in the supply chain that are doing that now. And so that, I think, will turn this waterfall process into more of what we're used to in software, which is an agile process. But if you have a design team on the front end of the agile process, one of the things the first McKinsey report, back in 2015 proved was that if you try and do this, generally everything gets faster except design, because now you're making all the design people worry about means and methods, and they're not even insured to worry about means and methods. So part of what we tried to do with Schema is make something that could speed up and cause good data to go into the supply chain to help this process without burdening the designers with means and methods problems. And that's a tricky fence to balance yourself on. And so I think Schema solves part of organizing what I would call the general arrangement in a way that makes it easier for the supply chain to act upon. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff in the supply chain that itself does not turn the waterfall process into an agile process. There's a whole bunch of other things happening in the supply chain that are in the latest McKinsey analysis that reveal what that might do that makes it more of an agile process than a waterfall process. And that could affect, contracts. It could affect, legal ownership over certain scope. So I'll be really interested. I don't have the answers in this session. I just have the framing and sort of the ammunition to have a really good discussion with people certainly in certain areas they're smarter than me with contracts and other things that have a really good, we could have a really good 360 conversation around what this might mean. And, how do we do we think it's an eventuality, or is this just speculation, I guess, is the other thing we'll find out in the room. How likely is it that owners, some of the people in the room are working with, are going to get impacted by this, right? Are you insulated from these trends, or is this going to be a industry-wide thing that just is going to happen when certain things become possible because of agentic AI?
Yeah, I mean, just because you finish coordinating a set of revisions doesn't mean we understand the implications of those revisions. And it just seems like it's an exponential problem when you don't know what you don't know. And the change is creating 10 more changes that weren't predictable. So are we getting to the point where we can understand we can understand the implications of revising a design decision, or we should understand it before we commit the changes even? Like, I don't want to coordinate a Revit file and then find out a day later. I want to know in the moment, if we make these changes, what are the implications of that? Because once I know the implications, maybe we don't make the changes. Maybe we do it in a different way. All right. Well, it sounds interesting, and I think we'll have some smart people in the room to discuss this from the standpoint of the owner. I think it needs to get more predictable as a discussion before we commit to documentation, and that's really hard, because we know why we want to do things because of the outcome, but the process is so. It's not only entangled, but it's just so entrenched. We crave predictability, and we can only work from our sort of known knowns and our pattern recognition. But
all the forces indicate that this will make things more predictable. A lot of what causes unpredictability is coordinating trades in the field. Actually, there's a group that has done measurements of field labor in order to document existing productivity and then the root causes that they could affect to improve the productivity in the field. So they do a Pareto diagram of all the root causes. So what do you think the number one root cause of productivity loss in the field is?
I'm going to guess and speculate, and I hope I'm wrong. These subs schedule their time 3 months out, and then you tell them to hold off and wait because of some other change. And they go, if I do that, how am I supposed to come back? When do I that scheduling must be, you either stick to it or you throw yourself into more unpredictability. I would say it's a scheduling of the subs. But
the number one problem that wrecks productivity in the field is absenteeism.
They just don't come. They just can't make it that day.
They're not there.
Right. Okay, so I get 50% credit for that.
It is scheduling, but it's the guys just not showing up on the job for whatever reason. Right.
It could be good reason. They're committed somewhere else, and they were committed here this point of time. And so, do we do what we do in the, when you have bulk materials in the space, you order more because there's going to be breakage or shrinkage or whatever.
And
we just build more bathrooms and throw the ones out. So
when you order things onto the site, and it's all over the site, then a trade can't get to do what it needs to do. So that's the number two, is trade interference.
Really? Yeah. Just interference.
Yeah. So it's really interesting to understand sort of what causes construction to be expensive, and the fact that design only has certain levers over it. But, when I was doing the work at Dassault, one of the customers that I worked with was Lend-Lease, and Lend-Lease had a mandate. This was a first principle of theirs, which was remove all wet trades on site, meaning we're not going to route any pipe on site. So they were largely a residential builder owner. So Lend-Lease was fascinating because they created the projects themselves through their ownership group and then built the projects with their construction group. And so as the owners were demanding faster schedules, the construction group would have to try and figure out how to deliver them. And so their mandate was get rid of plumbers on site because the trade interference is killing us. And so this is what resulted in them going to pods for kitchens and bathrooms in all the multifamily that they did. And in response to that, this is what certain large contractors in the US did by buying pod manufacturing plants for bathrooms, right? And then all the hotel owners going to pod-based bathrooms. So it's interesting how these root causes will cause big actors that are construction buyers to make fundamental changes that if the design, that certainly the architects that work with those owners are aware of the fact that they now have to pick a pod instead of designing a bathroom. It's now a product, right? Just like you might buy a window if you're a carpenter and install the window. That window is an industrial product, but it's single trade. It's installed by a carpenter. Whereas bathroom, basically, if you get that in a pod, you're eliminating all of the coordination, right? So McKinsey talks about some of this, and then I think there'll be a number of people in the room that will understand the implications of some of these things and what that might mean, rolling it forward to what designers have to deliver in order to stay relevant.
All right, then. I'll see you in about 6 weeks.
Yeah. Is it that far out?
End of September. It's the, so we're wrapping up. It'll be the last full week of September, 27th September through October 2nd. Arrive on a Sunday, offsite Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday sessions. And then we have breakfast and go away Friday. You're going to keep the single kayak, or are you going to migrate to a paddleboard?
I'm keeping single kayak, yeah. That being in control of my own environment was perfect.
Right. No, it's always a good day.
And an alligator, I can paddle really fast.
We don't see alligators. Oh, Marty, thank you so much. And best to Susan as well. I really appreciate you taking your time to discuss this. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Phil.
All right, buddy.
See you soon.